not in the public, or is this something that's going to go out to everybody? And then I kind of
gone either way, as many things go.
I kind of panicked. I was like, "Ah, fuck, shit! I don't know what to do." Welcome back, Mighty Vandals. The Tubs at the Club, brought to you by Snake River Stampede Whiskey. We'll tell you a little bit more about that in the show later on. We are the Vandals affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. That's right, your Idaho Vandals. I am your host, Dallas Hammer, joined by brave, bold Brian Marceau.
You know, it's good to be here with company. On Sunday, meaning Monday, I recorded the Big Sky Podcast Network Power Rankings, aka Playoff Handicapping episode. And I used to do that solo, like exclusively, but I've been doing it with Patty all year, and it's been fun. But I just had to go I had to go on Monday, and there was no one there. So it was lonely. It was a good show, but it was lonely. So it's nice to have some company to talk the season finale. Like, not trying to step on the headline, but it is so astonishing to me how goddamn fast the season goes. Because here we are, last home game, the guaranteed home game for us to talk. But we're here. We've got a good number of live listeners. We got some post-live listeners on the YouTube later. So, man, I wouldn't want to be anywhere else.
Yeah, it is the final regular season home game for the Idaho Vandals in the Kibbe Dome this weekend, senior day against Weber State. No producer redacted Martin Heemstra tonight, as he is at the women's basketball game right now. So it's just the dynamic duo of Slapstick, or maybe Slapdick.
Yeah, by the way, speaking of Slapdick, yes, Dallas, I have no problem moving my microphone. Is that better?
Yes, that's much better. I can hear you so much better, Brian. Thank you. Producing in public, now you guys should be able to hear Brian just fine. So, Tom Campbell, counting 11 seniors on the roster for senior day. Thank you, Tom, for that shout out. I did not go through and look at it, but it is definitely a smaller number, as, again, Eck has not purged this roster of upperclassmen, but has obviously built the roster his own and moved on from a lot of those Petrino guys, as we've seen for 3 years now, where it's been a bunch of young guys that are contributing and contributing and contributing. But Brian, we're going to jump right into this. It's Around the Bar, brought to us by Hughes River Expedition. I'm going to let you take the wheel. You have an interest in bad Big Sky teams much more than I do. So I'm going to let you guide this discussion on a bad Big Sky team.
I mean, yeah, mostly. Weber State is tough to talk about. And when I say tough to talk about, they're not tough to talk about at all. It's more that they're kind of a disappointing Big Sky story. Heading into the season, they're based off of how Weber closed 2023. There's a good amount of optimism that Weber figured out their offensive stuff, and that it just took Mickey Mental a year. Turns out, I mean, they're kind of right. Like Weber's one of the higher scoring teams in the conference. You know, in conference play, they're putting up 34 points a game. That's solid. That's around what Idaho did last season. Better than what Idaho did last season,
and certainly better than Idaho's doing this season.
Yeah, there's a heavy asterisk in that Weber has dodged the top of the conference. So the Wildcats had a very favorable make the playoff schedule, and Weber's got 3 wins to speak for it. So the first half, hey, they're scoring points against teams that are not that great. Tom Kendall saying they do have a top 5 win over Portland State, 43-16 in September. That's a very good point, Tom. Thank you. We will always make a top 5 discussion matters here. We don't skip it. But the other side of that discussion is, hey, if Weber hasn't played the top of the conference, maybe that means their defensive stats look better than they actually are. And my God, if that's the case, Weber's fallen off a cliff. They're giving up 34 points a game, which you might think, hey, that's not awful. That's like middle of the conference. But they're only 2 years removed from Jay Hill being gone. Transfer portal era changes the math of how quickly teams can rise and fall with internal appointments. And hopefully some ADs are going to be able to start paying attention to that. It sucks for the coaches who don't get the internal hires, but that's just a fact of where we're at right now. But Weber State defensively just fallen off a cliff. I watched them against Idaho State last week, and Idaho State's a solid offensive team. Weber did nothing at all to slow Idaho State. The only time Idaho State was slowed in that Weber loss this week was when Idaho State screwed things up themselves. There's really 2 names defensively that you really even have to pay attention to. And the big one is former Vandal edge rusher Kamari Bailey, who goes by Kamari Munir Bailey. I'm sure I butchered that. He leads the team in sacks, and then they had a preseason All Big Sky D lineman Braden Wilson, who's a junior. Those are the 2 names to pay attention to defensively for Weber. Otherwise, they just don't really stop anyone anywhere. So defensively, which I just bring that up because Weber, since Idaho moved down to the Big Sky, it's just been defense. Can they ever score any points? Now they can score. They're scoring fine. Now it's the other end of the ball. Like they can't do much. And it's not a schematic issue. They kept internal continuity of the coaching staff with Mickey Mental on the defensive side of the ball. They just don't have the guys this year to do what you're used to seeing Weber do.
Sorry. In the comment section, Andy Kaus from Facebook tonight. ? There's a WBB game, ... haters, ... Yes, Andy, unfortunately, sometimes we have to go up against the basketball games. If basketball started at the time it should start, which is after football, then we'd be fine here. But
also, hey, Andy's just giving us shit. But to give Andy some shit back, well, when are we supposed to go? Tuesdays, there's a coach's show. And then Wednesdays, sometimes there's games during the non-conference season or conference season. The games are always Thursday and Saturday. So hey, tell us when we're supposed to make this work.
I think this is a fault of Terry Golick. I think she needs to schedule better. That's all. We're just gonna turn it right into that. Anyways, guys, back to Weber State. Brian, you hit exactly what this Weber State team is. This is not Jay Hill's team anymore. You talked about the defense a little bit. Braden Wilson and Kamari Bailey being or Kamari Munir Bailey being the guys to know. Really, honestly, across their entire defense, because this is not the same Weber team that beat Idaho last year in Ogden. At the linebacking core, Winston Reed, all conference caliber player. he's graduated. Jack Kelly, all conference caliber player. He's now starring at BYU for Jay Hill. Garrett Beck is their only returning linebacker starter from last year. And then their secondary, Idaho's got Abe Williams, and the other 3 guys graduated. So they are legitimately trotting out an almost entirely new group of guys out there defensively.
And then Abe Williams was hurt, not even contributing on the Idaho side.
Where we weren't going to bring that up, but yes. So this is certainly not Jay Hill's team. This is not the hey, we're going to try to beat you 7-6. That is not this team anymore. Mickey Mental came in a couple years ago with the intent of, hey, we're going to start scoring more points. We're going to start scoring more points. And that's happened, but the defense has completely fallen off a cliff, Brian. And you mentioned the schedule. If we jump into their conference schedule, yes, they had top 5 Portland State, who's actually 9th in the conference, Montana 4th, NAU 5th, ISU 6th, Sacramento State 10th, and Northern Colorado 12th, who they lost to. So they have not had a particularly tough schedule, Brian, and they've barely eked out 3 wins. They've lost some very close games, but since they had that overtime stunner in Missoula, this team has completely collapsed.
Yeah, and I mean, I want to say that October 19th, that game against Sac State, when Weber State and Sac State are the exact same team. When those 2 teams are playing each other, I want to say that's when the come apart came, but it didn't. It was the week before, giving Northern Colorado their only win since 2022. So, it's been more than a month. I mean, look, they have 3 total wins on season. It's not that many, but this is a Weber team that's more than a month away from their last W. They're against NAU. My God, that was one of the worst I've seen any Big Sky teams look. Munoz threw his first 2 passes were picks. It took 5 minutes of gameplay for that to be 21-0. So no, Weber. We have to talk about Weber offensively, but the trajectory for this team, it's not like steady nosedive down, because it's a lot hard to have a worse trajectory than losing to UNC, losing in double overtime to Sac State, and then scoring 6 points against NAU. So I don't know, minor upward tick in the Idaho State game, but that's after just a catastrophic drop for around a month solid.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, Brian, I think that's the whole story there is you lose by 2 to McNeese and former Grizz quarterback Clifton McDowell. Then you go beat the Grizz while this is the season is looking good and Weber is ranked and things are rolling. You've lost some close games, yes, but because they lost 17-16 to Lamar in week 3 of the season. They got crushed by UW, but not everybody's Montana. Not everybody's going to beat UW. And then, yeah, Brian, you lose to Northern Colorado and then Sac State and then NAU. And yes, the offense showed life against Idaho State. And they certainly scored plenty of points against Sac State in that 51-48 double overtime game. But that's kind of the problem is Richie Munoz threw for over 300 yards and 4 or more touchdowns in both the Sac State and Idaho State games. But then against Northern Colorado and NAU, I mean, was honestly somewhere between pedestrian and putrid for both of those games. Like you mentioned, the first 2 passes being picked off that pretty much ended that NAU game right then and there. This is a team that is going to be really relying on the run game to keep things moving and short, small passes to just keep the ball moving. And they do a really good job of that, but they've done a really good job about that against more inferior opponents, Brian. And this is, I'm confident in saying that Idaho is the second best team that they have played all season long. And the best team they played all year long beat them 35-3. So it's, matchups matter. It's certainly a different point in the season, but when Weber was doing their best, they slipped past Montana and had a couple close losses to some good teams. And then it's been all downhill from there.
Yeah, and I guess hate to hit things descriptively. You talked like when Weber drops back, a lot of their passes are real quick right out to the flats, which is to say it can be hard to actually get a hand on Munoz because a lot of those plays they're just they develop way too quickly for any sort of rush to matter in that scenario. But a lot of what Weber wants to do is based off being able to run the ball. There's 2 names for you to remember there. Damon Bankson and Davian Godley. Both of those guys, that's their kind of 1-2 punch rushing the ball, and that's how it was treated against Idaho State. Those two running backs did kind of alternate drives and how many repetitions they got. Bankson leads the team on the season with 1,050 total rushing yards, 6 TDs, averages 6 yards a carry, over 100 yards a game. Godley is honestly about half that production. He's averaging similar yards per carry, 6.7, 53 yards a game. So look, both those two guys are pretty strong. Godley there's sometimes where he looks like he's a little bit more of a home run threat. Those two backs, look, it's not a huge contrast in styles. This isn't like, you have your battering ram and then you have your speed guy. Both Bankson and Godley they've got strong speed. They can make guys miss. And that's against the teams that are not as strong defensively. That's part of how Weber's been able to put up the kind of points they have. Like, they scored 48 against Sac State. They scored 55 in the win over Montana. That's kind of how those two on the ground are where you get the production. But hey, Munoz himself, he can be hot cold. Like, talk about NAU. He looked about as bad as he possibly could have. You talked about it. That's kind of how he plays stylistically. And when Munoz is cold, Mental is quick to completely shelve. I mean, doesn't actually pull him from the game, but to completely go away from the run game, which is that's favorable for me. If Mental's that kind of quick to pull the trigger. But on the season, especially the conference season, Munoz has had more games where he's at least been solid than he has been, a catastrophe. And my evidence here is he's thrown four total picks, 8 touchdowns. So hey, not that, not fantastic in conference play, but he's certainly not the worst quarterback Idaho's gone up against this season. Certainly as a passer, he's not close to the worst quarterback. I guess I'm more into, my interest in this game is more Idaho getting revenge for that loss, where Idaho last year did make Munoz look pretty good. That's happened. Other teams have made Munoz look good this season, but not everyone has made him look that way. I guess I'm more interested in when we get to the Idaho end in this as a revenge game. And then, hey, sometimes you get good luck and bad luck, and that's just how a season works. Idaho catching Weber in this month-long losing streak. Dallas, do you consider that good luck, or are you at all concerned about that mini rebound in the ISU loss for Weber last week?
I am concerned a little bit about that rebound, only because I've seen it before, where a team you think is, hey, this team should have been a whole lot better, and they've had a rough, bad year, and then they have nothing to play for. They can't even finish 500. They're playing for a 5-7 record, and that means they have absolutely nothing to lose by doing the fuck shit. And that's what scares me, is that this is absolutely a game where they can just do whatever they want. Like, the season's already over. Like, there's no, obviously you want to win your last 2 games, but there's really no expectation of that. I can't imagine at this point. Nick Weber, Dallas just described almost every PP coached Vandal team. Yeah, that's honestly kind of what it is. It's the PP PTSD is still heavy, because we've seen it happen to us, and we've seen our team do it to those. But Brian, for me, what is the most nerve-wracking part of this game? Yeah, Richie Munoz, again, super hot and cold. Damon Bankston, all conference running back. I think honorable mention in 2022, was hurt last year. He's healthy this year, obviously doing really well, second in the entire conference in rushing yards. But their offensive line, they figured it out. It as frustrating as it is for me, they had 4 seniors last year, and the only guy that came back was their right tackle, Gavin Ortega, who they moved to left tackle. They brought in Terrence Caldwell from Cornell. He started at center there, 17 games over the last 2 years. And then honestly, a bunch of guys that are just dudes, guys that were redshirt freshmen last year, guys that transferred down from BYU. And here they're obviously both their top 2 running backs averaging over 6 yards a carry, and they've allowed 10 sacks on the entire season. So that's the X factor that's kind of making me a little nervous is, and they can block. Obviously, we've seen Idaho has had trouble with the run game. that's not a great matchup there. But then you look defensively, and I don't see a lot defensively that scares me for Idaho. So I'm a little nervous about it, Brian, but I'm much more, as Ron Lowney says in the comment section, I would be more worried about Idaho State. Agreed, Ron. I'm certainly more worried about Idaho State. I think of this last 4 games of Idaho's season that we kind of called the first and second half, Eastern, Portland State, Weber State, Idaho State, I was certainly more concerned with Eastern and Portland. Obviously, Idaho got through them, not necessarily unscathed. I think I'm less nervous for these games, but it is senior day. Weird stuff happens. This is Idaho's first time. If they win, this is going to be Idaho's first time going undefeated at home in almost 30 years. So there's a lot of things that if you're not really looking at the football and you're just kind of looking at points to talk about, man, there's a lot of those like weird, like, well, but Idaho hasn't won all of their home games in a bunch of time. Well, Weber State has this offensive line that blocks really well and 2 running backs that can gash you.
And Jacob Sharp, wide receiver, he's one of the better receivers in the Big Sky. Like he gets yards after the catch on the short passes, but he can also beat teams deep.
Yeah. So now, luckily, he's about the only major receiver they have. The tight end position, it's mostly used as a blocker, like Idaho had done for the last couple of years. The combined, their 3 tight ends have combined for under 20 receptions, 1 touchdown, and a little over 100 yards. Like you're not going to see a lot out of the tight end position. Jacob Sharp is absolutely the guy. He scored against Idaho last year. He leads Weber in every single receiving category this year. Their other 2 starters each have 20 plus catches and a touchdown or 2, but Jacob Sharp is going to be the guy that's going to do it.
Weber has 17 receiving touchdowns on the year. Sharp has 8 of them.
Yeah, thank you. Exactly. That's a ton. Crewhead 76 in the comment section. This is exactly what gets me worried. I'm not worried about these games, except we seem to play down to our competition. And
I'll let you go first.
I don't know if I agree with that fully, but I do fully agree with Idaho doesn't seem to put teams away that they should put away. And this is a team that I think Idaho should put away pretty easily, especially if Jack Lane is playing. But when was the last time we truly saw Idaho put a team away, Brian?
Yeah, I like answering that question is weird because I agree with your basic point. But Idaho, the Eastern game felt like that was put away until it wasn't quite put away. Portland State, the further I get away from that game, the different I feel about it because Idaho gave up 9 points in the second half. If you give up 9 points each half, we call that a best defense in the Big Sky. So that's, want to be fair with what actually happened, while still acknowledging that people like when Crewhead says that, and we both didn't immediately go to that's not correct. It's because there's something about that's happened this season. Now, I think that should mostly be attributed to early in the season, Idaho not scoring points. And these last 2 games, that counts games last week with Jack Wagner, Idaho scoring 38, 39 back-to-back weeks. The Vandals didn't do that the entire second half of the season, 2023. So the fact of doing that late in the season, that's a development this year that's actually kind of transcends years as far as it being a big deal for Idaho scoring points. So I guess it's, you see something once, it just happened. 2 is a trend. 3, if something like that happens 3 times, you're going to start saying, well, Idaho's just figured it out offensively. And I think there's a chance they have. But to me, that's more the thing with Crewhead's comment is, why does it feel like they haven't put teams away? Well, because when you don't score points like that happened early, you don't truly put teams away. So then you have a screw up like against Cal Poly, the kick return or the fumble return for a touchdown. That's how a game gets, that's not artificially closer, but it feels closer. But I think you and I are both, I think we covered Weber pretty good. They can score the ball. They've got some weapons. They have a strong O-line. Their defense mostly sucks.
Yeah, that's pretty much spot on. Speaking of Weber, Nick Weber, with the correct pronunciation, in the comment section, this year feels like an inverse of last year, with the offense getting better over the course of the season, but the defense feels like they're regressing. man, I didn't want to put that out into the world, but Nick, that's exactly what this has felt like. Again, second half last week, huge adjustment, kept Sachet from tearing you up. Absolutely phenomenal. It's the performance you want to see and want to build on. But for a team that we thought the defense was going to be the stir of the drink, hasn't quite been that over the last few weeks. But again, I'd much rather them be rounding into best form in December rather than having peaked in September. So hopefully they're just going to keep taking that momentum and moving it forward. But we'll see. Brian,
I feel like it's been since that Montana State game, what you're talking about defensively.
Mm-hmm.
But that, like, hey, we talked about this on the post-game show, which you guys can listen to. Like, hey, the good news, bad news of the Portland State game is, hey, defensively, Idaho struggled with Sachet. Lots of teams did. That was largely in the first half. The question is, like, hey, how generalizable was that second half? In a lot of games that we've talked about, and hey, this dates back to last year. We've seen the interpretation of a rough first half, then a good second half is, oh, hey, defensive adjustments. They figured it out, guys. What are you complaining about? This is good news. This is why we play the games. If that's the case, then like nothing to worry about. We should see some of that materialize this week.
Very last comment, Brian, before we hit the beverage hour. Crew had 76. I could have completed passes against our weak zone coverage last week. That's where I am a little hesitant to just immediately dump on the defense, because I think that was the plan was, hey, let's make Dante Sachet beat us with his arm. Good luck. And it worked out really well. But it has been all year long. It seems like it's been a lot of deep cover for, and don't let teams beat you deep and let them just kind of dink and dunk their way down the field to points, which is great, except when you're not scoring enough points to make that a moot point. When they're doing that, and that's what's keeping the game close, that's when you start getting the butt pucker a little bit. But Brian, you know what doesn't make my butt pucker?
Just a few things. I
guess that's fair. A handful of things, but you're going to tell us all about one specific thing.
Yeah, I got to tell you a sad story, man. I'm recovering from sickness the last couple of weeks. I have barely been able to have my Snake River Stampede Canadian whiskey, which is devastating because, look, the double barrel finish on Snake River Stampede is part of what sets it apart. That plus back, it's a 3-grain whiskey, 80% corn, 10% rye, 10% malted barley. But you factor in 3 grains, you factor in the first fill bourbon, then finished in Oloroso sherry casks. That puts Snake River kind of at a level that other Canadian whiskeys, especially those you're going to see at your Idaho State liquor stores, the others just can't touch it. Snake River, it's one of the best buys as well in Idaho State liquor stores. $26 for what I think of as the best Canadian whiskey, except your only real comparison is the 1915 small batch, which is aged an extra 2 years, has a different finishing process, first fill bourbon, then it's finished in ex-Canadian rye whiskey casks. But hey, no matter which way you go, you can't go wrong. Grab yourself a Snake River. You're on mute.
Thank you. I changed the video over before we got to Snake River, or before we got through Snake River. So some of you might have seen, pulling up this picture of Day Buchanan here. Brian, I'm kind of leading you into the answer I'm expecting to get here, but what is going to be the key for Idaho against Weber State this weekend?
Well, hey, we're probably going to land on similar versions of this, but hey, the big deal is Weber State they don't do some of the things that Idaho struggled with. I mean, like we saw Portland State got the quarterbacks for like twice, and PSU never does that. So hey, like maybe you're minorly concerned, but for most of that game, Idaho's O-line has held up pretty well in spite of the injuries that they've sustained. Hey, maybe good news is the injuries were sustained earlier in the season, so that unit has had a chance to gel. But I mean, if Idaho can run the ball like they did against Portland State, or even just similar to the way Idaho ran the ball against Portland State, I mean, that's how this game gets put to bed right away. Weber's not quite on the level of bad PSU is on the ground, But Weber is really not that effective at stopping pretty much anyone. They're like middle, just like slightly below the median of Big Sky defenses. So look, anytime you get an all Big Sky level performance like we got last week out of Buchanan, if the Vandals can approximate something like that, whether it's from Buchanan or whether it's from other guys coming back from injury, that to me is offensively how Idaho really sets this game apart. With the other thing being, regardless of who is out under center for Idaho at quarterback. And hey, there is no news. We know that Wagner we know that Jack Lane, he hurt his wrist against Eastern. He'd been wearing a brace for a couple weeks. People who messaged us have told us like, hey, like the dude's looked fine public. He doesn't look like he's nursing an injury. Hopefully that means he's back. Off the top of my head, I don't have an update about if he's going to play at this moment, but he's had now 3 weeks counting. He had essentially 2 bye weeks plus this week. So that's 3 weeks off. If he can recover, that sounds like a lot of time to be able to recover from a non-fracture. No medical procedure had to take place. It's not like it sounds like he didn't have to have a cast or anything like that. So sounds like a minor injury. Hopefully he's back, but doesn't matter who's back. If it's Wagner, last week was the recipe for a Jack Wagner win. If Lane is back, just because he's been dinged up every time he's been out, like, I don't think that's a Lane fault or something like that, but just means the dude's probably not 100% even if he's playing. So the fewer hits Jack Lane can take if he's out, the better. But obviously, hey, running the ball matters. If Jack Lane's out there, you got to expect they're going to still want to make sure he gets those reps.
Well, and Brian, we haven't talked about this at all because it's a pretty hot and spicy conspiracy theory. So I haven't brought it up to you at all. We talk multiple times throughout the week, getting these shows planned. Could Idaho have been thinking, we got a bye week, 2 weeks for Jack Wagner to have a game plan installed to win? Oh, there's Brad Smith in the comment section. X said in the Patch and Coaches show that Lane will be back for ISU at the earliest. So it sounds like it's going to be Wagner again this week, which kind of derails what my whole thought process was, which was if you get Jack Lane to miss one more game this season, you could apply for a medical red shirt because playoff games don't count against your 4 games. And if he plays in Weber and ISU, that's 4 games and you could apply for yet another red shirt. But if he's not going to play this week, then that completely derails my conspiracy theory. So thank you, Brad Smith, for completely derailing conspiracy hour before we even get there. Ron Lowney jumping in, the Chucklemeister himself. Rest him for the playoffs too.
So medical redshirt rules are 30% participation. So this actually, I know what you're saying, but this actually would match what you were hinting at, which is if playoff games don't count for eligibility. If Lane plays against ISU but not Weber, that's 3 games. That's 25%. He theoretically would qualify for a medical redshirt.
There we go. I'm more familiar with the FBS rules of 4 games. If the rule is different in FCS, my bad, guys. But again, theoretically, the medical red shirt is still there.
Can I pause you?
Yes.
You're not wrong. 4 is your standard red shirt. A medical red shirt is different. Like it's a different set of rules to get to a medical red shirt.
That's fair. Which again, we certainly clear that as well. So, but it sounds like according to Eck in the Patch and Coaches show, thank you again, Brad, it's going to be Jack Wagner. So with that said, does Jack Wagner at the helm of the offense against Weber State, does that change your opinion of this game at all?
Not a little bit in that if Lane's playing, I loved how that Idaho looked offensively against Eastern. I feel like that's a for sure high flying offense that it was exactly what we had been hopeful for at the start of the season. I do think that the team has figured out how to use Jack Wagner better. Last week, rushing the majority of the time. Sometimes when Wagner threw a lot, it's because the team wasn't able to run the ball. So you got to be fair there. But I feel like Wagner's starting to get better at he's being able to hit the middle of the field a little bit. No one's ever going to confuse him for Jack Lane, but that's an asset that Wagner did not have early in the season. And I don't know. I mean, I just think Wagner himself is getting more comfortable with the role as well. So does it change my opinion? Duh. Because I think Jack Lane's a really good quarterback. Does this move the needle from I'm concerned about Idaho losing, or like that I would gamble Idaho losing? No, of course not. I'm still going to pick Idaho. I think Idaho's just a better team.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly true. I am 5% more concerned, only because I am not 100% sold that what we saw from Jack Wagner last week is what we're going to see from Jack Wagner this week. Not because of him. I thought he looked great. I thought watching him behind center was like, yeah, there's a reason why Montana State recruited this kid and offered him. Like, he can work as a Big Sky starting quarterback. But that was because Eck and Slice handed the ball to Day Buchanan 400 times. And when Day was off the field, Art Williams was in getting handed the ball. That's how you win a ball game with the quarterback that has accuracy problems. Run the damn ball and don't force him to throw it 30 to 40 times a game. They did that with Jack Wagner last week. It looked, again, so much better when he's not the person who's having to get the ball down the field constantly. It wasn't, here's 4 shots to Dwyer down the sideline over and over and over and over and then punt. It was, hey, we're going to sprinkle in a pass on 3rd down. We're going to use play action. We're going to throw the ball when it makes sense to throw the ball, not throw the ball for the sake of throwing the ball, which is what it kind of felt like, because for years now we've seen the Jason Eck, Luke Schleisner offense take time off of the clock, and it's really hard to do that when you're throwing the ball and it's hitting the ground all the time.
But I mean, some of that was out of necessity earlier in the year. And here's my point of evidence about why I'm going to say, okay, I'm a little less. I mean, look, hey, you just said 5%. You're still the Big Idaho to win. But this is why I think Wagner and the staff have kind of figured out a middle ground of how to work with Wagner that is not just throwing those sideline fades, that's when they were calling those plays. That's where Wagner's completing 50% of his passes. His last 2 starts, now, hey, granted, Cal Poly and Portland State, and the first half against Cal Poly was ugly. But it was the second half of Cal Poly where it felt like things clicked. So in those 2 games, Wagner's 28 of 40 for 4 touchdowns and a pick. That's 70% completion over the last 2 starts that he's had. So, like, hey, point taken about, like the offense looked differently, but also they had to get big plays in that point because they weren't getting those chunk yards. But if these last 2 Wagner starts are closer to who he is, even if you say, well, yeah, Portland State, Cal Poly, whatever, fine, cut 10% off that accuracy. That's still a huge step up from what the dude had been doing this year. And I don't think that's a complete accident. I just think he's a 3rd string, which I know some people in the comment section bitch about that being 3rd string. Nick Joseph won the job over Wagner. That's why I call him 3rd string. That's what Joseph started against Montana. That was not an accident.
Yeah, but Joseph, for all intents and purposes, would currently be the 2nd string quarterback if he was eligible to play.
Yes.
He's not the 2nd string quarterback because he has a broken collarbone.
Yes. So I just think it took a while for them to figure it out. And I think the team has it down a lot better there's some of the deep throws, but they do have Wagner hit that middle enough. And I don't think Weber's not Montana State, where they're going to likely be causing the type of pressure. And they certainly don't have a secondary team like Montana State who can punish a Jack Wagner mistake in the same way. So, no, like we're same page. We often land on the same place with different words, but I do think that's worth in mind keeping front and center when you're talking about Jack Wagner. The last 2 starts, especially second half against Cal Poly plus Portland State, he has looked like a different player.
Which, again, because we're both kind of saying the same thing with just different perspectives. Again, against Cal Poly, he threw the ball 23 times and there were 35 carries. And then last week it was even more in that direction of running the ball.
Yeah.
Quickly sprinkling some comments in from the comment section. Andrew Whipple just joined the chat. Any word on who's starting at QB this weekend? Again, it sounds like it's going to be Wagner. Brad Smith gave us the nugget from the coaches show. that Eck believes Lane will be back at ISU at the earliest. Crewhead 76, I like Wags. His decision making just makes me nervous. Simon Miller, Wags is improving with reps. That's a positive sign nonetheless. Also, our quarterbacks need to drink more milk. Fully agree on that. Crewhead 76, no double coverage throws to Dwyer. As long as that gets ironed out and it doesn't just become throwing the ball to Dwyer every other pass. Again, I like what we saw out of Jack Wagner and his Brian, like you said, in his last two starts, he's looked very good. He's completed passes. Yeah, he's not picking teams apart over the middle, but you don't have to necessarily at this level. The guys that do that are the guys that honestly are the guys that aren't here at this level for very long. But Brian, before we get any more into this, we're 40 minutes in. We've talked just about everything we possibly could about Idaho Weber. Any final points before we move on?
No, other than, I mean, hey, it's senior day. So if you can get your ass to the dome, get there. Like the trek is a big one for some of the Boise Vandals to make. So look, hey, if you're a Boise Vandal, you're like, dude, I've spent like $7,000 on trips. Like, hey, I get it. If you're regional, like Coeur d'Alene, like I am, if you're Moscow, if you're Spokane, you got to get there, man. Idaho could go undefeated at home for the first time in 30 years. Idaho's going to be favored to go undefeated at home. The Vandals are, honestly, if they hold serve, they're probably going to be the number 6 team in the FCS playoffs. We never know how long this stuff gets here. This isn't to talk doom and gloom. This is just the reality of the era we live. If you have something good, absolutely show up for it. It was a kick-ass environment against Eastern with that near sellout. I would love to send our seniors home with one, I don't want to send them home with this game. I want to win. I want 2 wins so we have another home game. But hey, like seniors, guys like Keyshawn James Newby, Jakari Larman, Sir Barnes, Kyron Beecham, Tommy McCormick. By the way, some of those guys are absolute staples of these last few years. Matthias Bergstrom. We got the transfers like KJ Trujillo, Corey Thomas, then of course Mike Martinez and Spencer Fisher just to hit the list. We want to give those guys a real nice memory of their last regular season home game. So if you can make it, you gotta.
Yeah, the Whitebird drive this weekend could be pretty rough for some of those Boise folks. So we understand. But if you're in the area, guys, come on, get out there. Let's give these guys one last final big send-off. Speaking of a big send-off, Brian, if you are looking for a great all-inclusive week-long vacation, do not look past your backyard, because Hughes River Expeditions has been Vandal-owned and operated since 1976, and they're ready to take you on the vacation of a lifetime. Enjoy a multi-day trip down the Middle Fork of the Salmon, the main Salmon River of No Return, the Salmon River Canyons, or even the Selway, and you can check out special trips like one to see the Perseid meteor shower. Camp on pristine beaches, run amazing whitewater, hike scenic trails, spot the wildlife, soak in beautiful natural hot springs, and fish the most remote stretches of river in the entire USA. Just bring your clothes and let Colin and HRE handle the rest. Grab a paddle, catch dinner, and ride the bull all throughout the Gem State. Call them now at 406-540-4450 or check them out at hughesriver.com. Brian, it is senior day. That is very sad to realize that, like, there's not a whole lot of more games to see Tommy McCormick doing his thing. One of the Vandals that I'm going to remember for 20, 30, 40 years at this point. Of, man, you remember how much fun it was watching that guy play. It's sad. It sucks that, this is what happens. Guys graduate and move on. But again, guys, this is, like Brian said, this is not something to take for granted. I hate that I'm even going to speak this into existence right now, but let's say things get a little bit weirder in the FBS. Wazoo somehow stumbles over their dick into the college football playoff. You think Jake Dickert comes back next year? Probably not. Would Jason Eck take the Wazoo job if they offered him a 4 times pay raise? Yes, they probably would. I'm not trying to speak this into existence, and I'm not saying Jason Eck is going to get offered this job that's not even open, but there are things that can happen that can make all of this go away immediately. So when we've sat through decades of sadness, it's man, if you're not bought into Idaho football now, I don't know if you're ever going to buy back in. Brian, you're muted.
I noticed that a second late. I'm with you. I want to like stay focused on the game itself because like football season is only so long. We have an entire off season to bitch about stuff that is not happening this week, and for a fact, the coaching staff is not changing this week, guys. So that's kind of more what I care about. This is more what I care about. But I mean, I will say, like I've experienced in Coeur d'Alene seeing way more Vandals all around, way more people wearing their Idaho gear. That's obviously related to the complete 180 of the program and the sustained 180 that we're living through right now. Insane to think that even with the injuries that Idaho's dealt with, they are on pace to have a better seed in the playoffs in 2024 than the team had last year. That's called development. That's called recruitment. That's more what I care about. But like, hey, what you said is not wrong. I just think we have a long off season where we can deal with that. We have to pick the rest of the Big Sky.
Yeah, 100%. I want to put one last little bow on top of that because Steve Kurtz is the only person who correctly called this out in the comment section. There's a reason I went with that. 4 words: Wazoo will cook it. So that's why I spoke into existence this ridiculous scenario that's not going to happen because it's Wazoo. Good things don't happen to Wazoo. Moving on, Brian, picking the Big Sky. Let's just jump in hot and heavy, Brian. We're gonna start with the hottest game of the weekend. Sac State at Cal Poly.
Actually, slightly more interesting than you might guess because Sac State and Cal Poly have the same number of Big Sky wins on the season. They both have 1 total, right? This has been a sad story for Sacramento State. I still think that they're going to be fine against Cal Poly in spite of the 1 Big Sky win that the Hornets have picked up. Like they're still a relatively solid team. Like their issue is they're giving up 42 points a game. Insane to think that Andy Thompson, defensive coordinator, so defensive mind, who Sac State had been great defensively last couple of years, he takes over, and what in God's name happened to Sac State defensively? They can't stop anyone. Like he's giving up 42 points a game. Good God, who are you supposed to beat? Well, you'll beat Cal Poly because I just don't think Cal Poly is good enough. That's it. And Sac can still score points.
As Crewhead 76 says, nut sack number 8 in the Pac 8. Yeah, well, good luck going to the big or the Pac, whatever the hell the number is going to be. Sac State, when you're a 3-7 team in the Big Sky after this quick of a fall off, yeah, you're going to succeed in big boy football.
I need to contextualize this for a second though with Sac State. Like I didn't even realize how bad this was in Big Sky play. Montana State, they're the number 1 scoring team. Dallas, they have 36 touchdowns in 6 games. How many touchdowns do you think Sac State's given up in 6 Big Sky games?
40.
Though it's not quite that bad because that'd be like 55. That'd be like 50 points a game. They've given up 34. So if you think Montana State's an offensive juggernaut, pretty much that's what Sac State allows every single week, regardless of who they play. So that's the story of Sac State's season this year.
Yeah, unfortunately, all 7 lost teams are not made equal. I am fully on board with Tom Kendall. Due to women's soccer, go Cal Poly, but I just no, Sac State by a mile, maybe not a mile, but I don't think this game will be particularly close. Brian Martin also picking Sac State. No word yet from Treeb or Jeff, as sometimes we get our pick'ems out a little bit too late to get them onto the show, but we'll get them all updated and mention things for next week. Last week, Brian, I actually didn't keep a note of who won. I think it was you.
I won because I didn't lose a single pick.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Is you went 6-0, I went 5-1 because I picked Montana because I was trying to curse Montana into losing, which worked. So don't question my methods. We're gonna just keep picking off the bottom of the barrel here, Brian. ISU at EWU.
See, that's not a bottom of the barrel game for me. I think that's actually interesting. Now, if you go to ESPN, apparently the entire Pacific Northwest disagrees with me because the tickets on the secondary market for that game right now, $6. So, yeah, that's Eastern. That's the downside of Eastern playing the way they do. So I find it interesting because Idaho State's trending upward, but Eastern's not a bad team. And Eastern can move the ball, and Idaho State's strength is certainly not on the defensive side. So I'm left with a bit of it's a little bit hard to decide which end to go with, but I'm going to go Idaho State, largely because Eastern is just such a catastrophe on the defensive side, in particular against the pass, in particular against play action, that I just think Cody Hawkins is going to say, yeah, okay, like they actually might be a more talented team than us, but I don't care. This is a dream matchup for what Cody Hawkins wants to do offensively. So I kind of hate saying it. I'm going Idaho State, but like the Bengals also, they're not for real as in playoffs or something like that, but they're not a bottom tier Big Sky team. They're a middle tier Big Sky team. So like, hey, credit over there for what's happened these last couple of years. I'm going to go Idaho State.
We're definitely seeing a split in the comment section here. Simon Miller, I'll root for the scoreless tie. That's probably where I am, actually. Tom Kendall, Eastern. Nick Weber, ISU. Crewhead 76, Eastern. Ron and Nick Weber both asking $6 to watch that game. Simon Miller and Travis Thompson both picking EWU. Steve Kurtz, ISU on a roll. I think ISU is the better team, but I think Eastern wins this game, Brian, and I think it's because this game is being played in the shithole of Cheney, Washington. It is going to be a high of like 40 on Saturday. It's going to be windy as hell, probably even windier because it's out in Cheney. It might be raining because we've been getting dumped with rain. We're supposed to get rain this weekend, I think on Sunday. I could see that moving forward. Ryan Phillips also picking Eastern. Michael Long, ISU 84-77. That would actually be a fun one. And Ron also pointing out high school games charge more than $6 at this point. This is the reason, Brian, that I counted this as one of the circling the drain games is because it doesn't mean anything to anyone. Idaho State is not going to get into the playoffs. And because it's in Cheney, I think this is going to be an ugly, sloppy mess. If this was in a dome, hell yeah, man, give me the 45-42 all day of the week. This reeks like I've been out on that field too many times where the rain is going sideways, it's windy, and even the best not the best offenses, more like the Baldwin offenses figured out how to score points back then. I just don't believe it's going to be a great game, Brian. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope
my minor pushback is this game does mean something. Idaho State is playing to finish above 500 for the first time in a long time. Like, dude, you can say that all you want, but this Idaho State they're not playing like this is for nothing. I mean, Idaho State looked pretty damn tough for Idaho State against Weber. So like, no, like I completely disagree. This means nothing. It might mean nothing for Eastern, who's playing for pride, and that's it. But no, like Idaho State believes themselves. I don't know if that's enough.
Let me slight pushback. I never said it didn't mean anything to the players playing the game. I meant it didn't mean anything in the concept of FCS football. If ISU goes above 500, woo.
Well, no, I completely disagree with that. Again, like if that's like I don't, at least for me, I don't have the reductionist that like you make the playoffs or it doesn't matter. I do think Idaho State building momentum matters for the Big Sky. It matters for them potentially in recruiting. So like, not like, dude, Crewhead, yeah, I have a soft spot for wanting good, interesting teams in the Big Sky. And once we have an interesting team, yeah, you're right, Crewhead. I don't write them off for no reason. So yeah, that's why I'm saying this isn't nothing. By the way, like, hey, this matters for Idaho. Would Idaho State finishing the year hot, and that's where Idaho plays last week of the season? It's not nothing.
Jack Lane's going to kill him anyways, man.
I hope so.
The Bengal killer. Moving on from way too much Jungle Land talk. Wow, way too much Jungle Land talk here. NAU UNC.
Well, there will not be much talk here. Northern Arizona is going to win that quite easily. Northern Arizona just scooted into the top 25. The Lumberjacks need to win out and get help to make the playoffs because that Lincoln game, which honestly should be a deduction of a win as far as their playoff resume is concerned. But obviously you're going to have to go Northern Arizona. I mean, by the way, quite a couple few weeks for NAU to close the season out. Last week, Cal Poly. This week they get Northern Arizona, and things get interesting at Eastern next week. But if you needed momentum to get into the playoffs, well, like I said, hey, sometimes your luck is good, sometimes it's awful. Yeah, NAU got the luck they needed to close the season out.
Yeah, Northern Colorado is ass cheeks. Again, their one win is Weber State. Their one win in multiple years is this year's Weber State team.
What are you talking about? They're scoring 11 points a game, Big Sky play. What do you mean?
Thank you. That is double digits. That is essentially a win. Everybody in the comment section picking NAU. Again, we are talking about NAU being a fringe playoff team if they get some help. I don't think the Big Sky gets 5 guys in, but Montana State, UC Davis, Idaho, Montana, and then NAU would be that weird 5th one if somehow 5 get in. But that's really the extent of the interest in this game, Brian. Northern Colorado's probably going to get crushed. I know it's in Greeley, but does Northern Colorado score more than 5 points?
No.
Against NAU?
Absolutely not.
So, Brian Phillips, cue Brian McCaffrey comment. Brian, your comment on the McCaffrey family.
Well, there's nothing to comment on. Like, Northern Colorado, just sad. Like, I like Ed Lamb, but this level, I don't think anyone was expecting 2 years and getting like a win when Ed Lamb came to Northern Colorado. We thought that was kind of a coup for Northern Colorado. Hell, when we did our coaches shows back, in the pre-act days, we brought up like, hey, if Ed Lamb landed in Idaho, we'd be pretty stoked with that as news. So no, man, it's just sad. I've tried to be a little less flippant talking about some of the lower Big Sky teams, which is sometimes a very tall task, I might add. But with that's my view on Northern Colorado. Like the more fun, interesting Big Sky games there are, the better. I mean, we'll talk about this season later on, Dallas, with how many close games Idaho's played. I think when we're done with the season, the jury's in, we'll be like, my God, that was a fun season. Even though you wish you could kick some teams' asses so you can not care, but at the same time, close games are fun games. And if I'm going to a game, I want it to be a fun game. The more teams like that there are, that's a better Big Sky season. UNC is just not there. Ryan Phillips, they're a high school McCaffrey senior that could help UNC next year. Well, I mean, is there anyone who feasibly can score a touchdown in the entire nation? They could help UNC. So yeah, maybe, I don't know, like a 5th cousin or something like that.
Yeah, Crewhead 76. Fast Eddie Lamb has a long road at NOCO. Again, this is not a Northern Colorado podcast, but Ed McCaffrey set that program back years. I know in the era of the transfer portal, it's very easy to, well, maybe not very is the wrong word, but it's much easier to rebuild a team on the fly. We've seen Jason Eck do it. That wasn't the case at Northern Colorado. No. There was not a 1-year turnover there. Probably not. I mean, you'd hope they'd be along farther in year 2, but again,
there wasn't a base of talent that Ed Lamb inherited.
No, because Ed McCaffrey pushed out 50 transfers or whatever the number was. Anyways, ass cheeks for a coach. NAU by a clipboard. Montana hosting future Montana assistant Bruce Barnum. Who you got? Top 5 matchup of top 5 PSU and certainly not top 5 Montana.
Well, this is the protected rivalry game we all look forward to. Montana, Portland State, which, by the way, thanks, Terry, for that one. That's the Idaho and Montana is not protected because of Terry. So there you go, guys.
Phenomenal job from our athletic director.
Look, hey, what's kind of interesting? The game a little more than you might guess. Montana. Look, Bobby Hauck, so they still don't have a starting quarterback. They still go tandem, which is incredibly dumb. Logan Fife has been obviously better than Keeley Ayat. It isn't really close. But part of why people are so pissed in Montana after that Davis loss 30-14 last week is Hauck just says he goes by feel when he's going to pull one of the quarterbacks or not. And now that he's getting questioned about it, he's going to be stubborn about it, which is to say it's going to get, if anything, it'll probably get worse. Or he won't play Logan Fife because of that social media post Fife had after the game. One of those two things. Now, Portland State defensively isn't going to punish Montana. This is just another Portland State hey, is Sasha going to go wild? Montana's awful defensively. So there's every chance Sasha Ray could go wild. but also like off a loss, I don't think Montana's going to completely torpedo their playoff chances. This is essentially a playoff game for the Grizz. They're going to get their ass kicked to close the season out against Montana State. The Grizz need this last win to get to 8 wins so they can be kind of that safe mark. But Montana's in a place that, again, like every Grizz, is just going to be kind of pissed right now too, because there's no way that this Montana team is going to be able to skip that first round of the playoffs unless they get just a god-awful amount of help. But that would be like half the good FCS teams are all going to lose. That's not possible because some of them play each other. So, yeah, I'm picking Montana. But there's like some weird intrigue around this game, mostly around like, hey, like the Grizz can't screw this one up. Does this team have the ability to screw it up?
Yeah, man, pretty much every single comment in the comment section mentioning that people think Portland State's got a chance to win this. Big shout out to Ryan Phillips, one of our favorite Vandals. Hawk Tua, couldn't have said it better. And extra special shout out, I almost said it, but I'm not going to. Travis Thompson, hashtag FBH, and I'm hoping you guys are all smart enough to figure out what that means. Brian, the conspiracy theorist in me says the Grizz are going to win this game because Bruce Barnum's going to do his buddy a solid and do just as poor of a job coaching this team as he's done for most of the last handful of years. And you got to set yourself up. If you're not looking for your next job opportunity as a coach, what's the best job in coaching? Fired head coach. But a lot of those guys don't want to sit around on their asses getting paychecks. So you got to set up that next opportunity. And realistically, that next opportunity for Bruce Barnum is probably going to be coaching with Bobby Houck in a couple years. So I got to go with Montana. I hate it. Hate it. But this feels like Montana wins this game. They paste Portland State. They get crushed by Montana State. And then they buy their way into the playoffs. They win a first round home game, and then everyone's like, oh, look, Montana, look how good we did. I'm just not, it just doesn't feel, as much as I want Montana to lose this game and then lose to Montana State and not make the playoffs, it doesn't feel like that's going to happen. This just feels like a ho-hum victory, get themselves in, buy that first round playoff game, and move on. There's Ryan Phillips. Agree, Dallas, especially at home. That's the big thing. If it was on the road, I'd maybe think a little bit different because, again, bring your own energy, but just doesn't feel like it. Oh, Andrew Whipple, no way PSU beats the Grizz by 37.
Just to the PSU interest, I Googled Bruce Barnum's contract. There's nothing. Everything dates back to like 2015 when he got the initial contract.
His original contract.
I was more trying to see if this is the contract year for him. I don't know.
Yeah,
but there's an analyst position in Missoula if he needs it.
Yes, 100%, and maybe a landing spot for second Houck as well. If that coaching staff decides to be moved on. Quick shout out to Tom Kendall and Martin. Obviously, Martin never picks Montana, and Tom shouting out he picks PSU just simply because of Martin. Martin saying FTG. Yeah, guys, we're going to move on from Montana now, but I as much as I want them to lose this game, it doesn't feel like that's going to happen. Brian, this is probably the game of the year, maybe?
In the Big Sky. I mean, the game of the year would probably so far be North Dakota State, South Dakota State, but you're talking about number 2 Montana State at number 4 UC Davis.
Bingo, bango, bongo.
I mean, honestly, I'm not really that on the fence about this. I mean, having seen UC Davis on the road as Vandal, having seen Montana State on the road as a Vandal, Montana State looked at least a step ahead of what UC Davis is. I think it's going to be UC Davis. Montana State will be tighter than Idaho Montana State was, but Montana State, like, maybe underrated in talking about Montana State this season because of how many points they score is they're just as good on the other side of the ball in just about every way possible. They have the best scoring and best total defense in the Big Sky. They've given up 12 touchdowns on the Big Sky season total. Now, hey, like they've dodged a few teams, but like they played Idaho. Idaho scored a touchdown against Montana State. So no, like I'm picking the Cats. I mean, To be fair, UC Davis can beat you through the air and on the ground, and Miles Hastings can pick defenses apart. So are there ways that UC Davis can make this close and win this game? Yes. The issue is I just don't think they're going to be able to really get to Tommy Mellott or stuff the run in a meaningful way. Like, one of their strengths is with the Connors brothers. Like, they can be pretty tough over the middle. I don't think Montana State cares. I think they're going to just abuse teams on the ground until they're forced to pass. And Davis is good, but I don't think they're that good defensively. So I'm going to go Montana State. Again, I think Montana State is going to be competing for a national title. I think Davis is got, they're a top 5, top 6 level team. But, again, I talked about this on the last show that I did on Monday. As a Vandal, do I want a rematch in the playoffs with UC Davis? Yep, sign me up right now. Do I want a rematch with Montana State? Absolutely not. I want nothing to do with seeing those Bobcats this season.
Could not agree more, Brian. I am wearing, I can't get my leg up because I'm certainly not that flexible. I am wearing Mr. Plow socks. Please don't sue us, Disney. There's not a chance in hell I'm picking Mr. Plow in this game. Montana State is going to dog walk UC Davis. Brian, there is one single game Montana has not won by 2 touchdowns or more this year, and it was their FBS opponent. Then after their, again, 4-point win over an FBS school, their next closest game is their 2-touchdown victory at Eastern Washington. Otherwise, every other game has been a bloodbath. This game is in Davis, so it's going to be pretty good weather. There is nothing that could convince me that UC Davis is going to beat Montana State. I mean, I'd love to be surprised. I'm sure Ron is not thrilled to hear me say that, but there's nothing about this team that screams, oh yeah, we're going to lose to UC Davis. Like, Montana State is an absolute wagon, and they're going to be most likely down into the Final Four yet again and run into one of the Dakotas. Or Dakota States, excuse me, and see what happens. Ryan Phillips, shout out, 6'7" kicker. Love that guy.
Well, you know what, Ryan? I love that guy in Moscow last year too. I do want to give Andrew Whipple a quick shout out. He's going back to that PSU Montana game where I'm not going to relay the entire conversation, but he gives a shout out to the top 5 facilities at Portland State, saying if the game at PSU is maybe a little closer, if a stray soccer or baseball hit Eck, he meant how, knocks him out, giving a shout out to those invisible softball fields that you get from the camera view on the ESPN Plus feed. But we got to talk that Idaho game, man. We're well over an hour in. We got to give the people what they want.
Well, what the people want is Martin, but Martin's not here to keep us on track. So this is what happens. It becomes amateur hour, and I just kind of lose the plot halfway along our drive here. Brian, in the pick'ems, Martin and I have made identical picks, other than obviously he did not pick Portland State. Did not pick Montana. He picked Portland State. Circling back around to Weber State, Idaho, Martin's got him 35-24 in favor of the Vandals on senior day. Your thoughts, final thoughts on Weber State, Idaho, and your score prediction.
Idaho 38-17. I'm buying that this team, even with Jack Wagner, has figured out what it needs to do on the offensive side of the ball. And I am selling on Weber defensively being able to, kind of have much footprint against Idaho. I want more Day Buchanan like we saw. I really think there's a chance that Idaho has figured out a late season formula that's going to help them out in the playoffs, which is a big deal because the last couple seasons for Idaho, they played their best ball in October and maybe early November, but not into the playoffs, even though they picked up that win last year. If Idaho is on a different trajectory, aka right track, to close the season out, that matters in a different way. And I think we have evidence to say that the Vandals very well may be there. If we see it again, I think we can officially put the offensive issues narrative to bed. I just want to see it, but I think we're going to.
Brian, can you give me that score prediction one last time?
38-17.
38-17. Thank you, because I was trying to type it into the outline and I completely missed it because I suck. In the comment section, very quickly, Duffers Tavern, Idaho 31-20. Hamper tosses a touchdown. Travis Thompson, Vandals. Simon Miller, concerned, but I'm going to say first undefeated slate in the Dome in almost 30 years. Nate Meek, Weber has really good special teams. That's what I'm most worried about. had.
Yeah,
It's kind of slipped a little bit, much like their defense. But again, it's still Weber. Like there's.
I'm going to push back. Nate, I love you. But you're a couple years back on this. Weber's lost a couple games this year because of shitty special teams, in particular kicking game
or snapping game.
Which actually that had rectified itself, but that dude is still there, and he did blow a snap on a punt against Idaho State this week.
Yes, he did. Andrew Whipple, Idaho 34, Weber 27. Ugly game, but ugly can be good. Tom Kendall 44-17. Steve Kurtz, Vandals remain undefeated at home. Simon Miller 37-23. Tribe from the North. Nick Weber 31-6. Ryan Phillips 35-21. Crewhead 76. Run the fucking rock 38-21 Vandals. Michael Long 38-24. Demez saying Cats will win by 10 plus. Bet. Ron, Idaho by 14. I'm Duffer, you nailed me. I wrote down Idaho 30-20. So pretty much in agreement there. I don't know if I think Hamper is going to throw a touchdown. I would love to see that, but it does feel like this is Idaho's time to shine. This offense should hopefully, I mean, all three of us picked them into the 30s again, Brian. This is hopefully the time. We're trying to speak it into existence. Idaho is getting things hot and ready at the right time rather than peaking in late October like we've seen the last few years. Nate Meek jumping back in. They are number 6 in net punting and number 10 in kickoff returns. So they do still have some stuff, but they're certainly missing the Rashid Shaheed and Williams return superstars that they've had before. Demez, Idaho by a lot, 17 plus margin. Thank you for that. Demez, I'm assuming the Cats one was for the Bobcats, not the Wildcats. So Demez picking Idaho by a lot. Andrew Whipple, ugly can get you a prom date. And you know what, Brian? I think that is probably the perfect place for us to end this show. We're going to be live sometime this weekend to talk about the reaction show, but this is a late game, guys, 5:00.
Yeah, we'll see how we make that one work. But until then, patreon.com/Tubs of Club to support the show. Less than a cup of coffee a month to keep the lights on, aka my whiskey cabinet full. If Patreon is not your thing, you can always do the Venmo at Tubs of the Club. Either way, you can get yourself set up with hashtag Only Tubs Discord. Best place to talk Vandal football online, especially game day.
And with that, guys, as always, go Vandals.
Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.